This is My Taste is Better Than Yours, the manga podcast where Guardian Enzo and I, Samu, discuss some of our favourite series and figure out, is my taste better than yours?
Hello again. To welcome to My Taste is Better Than Yours. And we're going to talk about uh, another favorite manga. First time it was Samu's, this time it's mine. And this time we're going to talk about Yokohama Kaidashi Kikou, YKK as it's almost universally known. And I want to thank Samu for giving me such a short manga to read in preparation for our first recording, because I gave him a considerably longer one. His favorite was Blank Canvas, which was only 5 volumes, which I ended up really loving. YKK is 14, and it's, to be honest, I didn't reread it for this. I thought, can I possibly find time to reread a 14 volume manga at the same time I'm reading the 5 volume manga for that, and dealing with website and work and all the other things? And my honest answer was no. And so I'm gonna be probably a little bit chain of consciousness in my reflections on this story. Those who follow me on my website, lostinanime.com, free plug, thank you. Maybe we'll do a kind of a link in description thing, but I did have a top 10, my personal top 10 manga countdown a little while ago. And indeed, Yokohama Kaidashi Kikou was number 1 on my list. And it's an interesting history with this manga, because for some reason it was never licensed in English until just like less than 2 years ago. And yet it still had a big following, despite not being licensed almost anywhere outside of Japan. I mean, it was licensed in France, but everything gets licensed in France. But most languages did not have a license for it. Yet, strictly through word of mouth and just through reputation, it was well known in English. I knew many of my fellow manga and anime fans were aware of it before I started reading it. The original series ran quite a long time ago, from 1994 to 2006. The mangaka's name is Ashinano Hitoshi, who's written several excellent series, including one that's sort of a semi-sequel to this one. But this is really, I think, by most people considered his magnum opus. It is a seinen manga. 14 volumes, as I said, and finally introduced, licensed in English by 7 Seas a couple of years ago, maybe 15, 18 months ago, something like that. So I'm very excited to see how it's received now that it will theoretically reach a wider audience in the English language than it was able to before. It did get a couple of abortive attempts at anime, OVAs, and I think it got some sort of a live action or something like that too. But it's another one like Blank Canvas. When I read this, I was always thinking to myself, why isn't this an anime? This would be such a beautiful anime, because it's so evocative and so visual. And the first comment I have to make about my love for YKK is the art. The art is incredibly beautiful. I love the character designs because they're very unique, but also the backgrounds. And this is, what I get the feeling is that many people will read YKK now and say, oh, this is derivative of this is derivative of that. And the reason being because all of those things are derivative of it. It is incredibly influential across many different genres, but it's also, in my estimation, it is the most pure slice of life series that maybe has ever been written. It slice of life is a grossly overused descriptor genre, but it was the genre exists for YKK. It is slice of life, and that life that it's a slice of is a dystopian life. It's set somewhere in around Yokohama, the Miura Peninsula. It's real places that are recognizable if you know the area, but not recognizable because something very radical and very very dramatic has happened, and civilization, as we would describe it, really no longer exists. But so the population is a fraction of what it was before, but not only has human society changed, the natural landscape has changed in a very profound way too. So you're looking at real places through the lens of a dystopia that's not just changed the culture, but also changed the physical world as well. And I'm going to talk about another series that a much more recent series that this reminds me of. I'll talk about it when we get to the recommendations section. But the other thing about that is Ashinano does not really bog himself down in details about how and why all this happened, because what you come to realize as you read it is that those things aren't really the point. The point is the day-to-day lives of the people who are here. Because no matter what their circumstances, when people are alive, they live their lives. They appreciate the small things. There's a current anime called Kyujitsu no Waramono-san, Mr. Villain's Day Off, which is quite different than YKK, but it has a certain similar sensibility of appreciating the small things in life: a good cup of coffee, an ice cream from the convenience store, a cute cat. And no matter what else is going on in the world, we all still have to sleep and wake up in the morning and drink and eat. And unless we're hermits, even in a dystopian world, we interact with other people. And some of the people in this story are androids, including the main character, whose name is Alpha. But much of the time, you would never know that Alpha was an android if you didn't already know that. Because her interactions with the people are very recognizable and very natural. So where Blank Canvas shines a light on reality by presenting reality in unvarnished accuracy, YKK does what many great science fiction and fantasy does: is it uses the freedom of speculative fiction to enlighten real life. And I think that's a very delicate skill. It's not easy to do, and I think Ashinano does it masterfully, especially with this series. And really, it's Alpha's. She runs a quiet country cafe, which is what one of the OVAs was called, Yokohama Kaidashi Kikou. It's her little coffee shop, and there are a few people around in her area. There's an old man that everyone just calls Oji-san. He has a son, or a grandson called Takahiro, who is quite young at the start of the story, perhaps 9 or 10. But his growth is one of the interesting elements of the story. There are other people. There's a couple of other androids who play significant parts. But there are also characters who are not recognizable to us as what we would think a character would be. This manga won many awards, but the most prominent award it won is called the Seiyun Award, which is given for the best science fiction manga. And indeed, in fact, it's not even just limited to manga. It's almost like the Japanese equivalent of a Hugo or a Nebula. And so this is definitely a science fiction story. But again, it's also in a completely different way from Blank Canvas. It is an incredibly real story, and the most powerful moments are when we recognize elements of our life in the lives of these people who are in what seems, by all accounts, to be a dying world. And we don't know why it's dying, but we recognize in any event the things that they love, the things that make them sad, the things they care about. We recognize ourselves in them, and in a sense, the fact that this is a seemingly foreign landscape, alien landscape, one could even go so far as to say, that makes that recognition even more powerful when it hits. So for me, it's hard for me to go too much into details on the plot, because the things that happen in this series, it's less about that than it's just the mood that it creates. It's the feeling of the story. And it's a very hard series, I think, to describe to someone who hasn't read it. And whereas I think Blank Canvas is a relatively easy story to describe, although you won't get the depth of it, I think YKK is a very difficult story to describe. So in that sense, I think I've given myself quite a hard task here. But I am very curious. Samu, who I know read it many years ago, and it did not have a big impact on him at that point. I'm very interested to hear his reflections on it now, why he thinks that was, whether he thinks that's changed. So after that long-winded intro, Samu, I'm going to turn it over to you for your thoughts on YKK.
Yeah, so like you said, I was familiar with it. I'd read it over 10 years ago, I want to say. I don't know how old I was, but I was probably late teens around then, because like you say, it was, even though it had no official translation, it was very popular online. It was one of those series that if you typed in manga recommendations or best manga of all time, like what should I read, this was often a series that would come up in so many of those like visuals or recommendations. So I did try it, but looking back on it, well, I can say for certain I didn't really like it as much when I read it back then. Looking back on it though, I do wonder if part of that is down to just my age and my experience at the time. Now, this is a seinen manga, and I don't want to like box people in so much by the demographics of manga titles, because anyone can enjoy any demographic, even if it's not intentionally made for them. I do think it takes me back to, or it makes me think of when I see online people, teenagers who, I don't know, let's say they're like 14, 15, 16, they want to read something that's like quote unquote deep. And so many times I see their three favorite series of all time are Berserk, Vagabond, Vinland Saga. That's their favorite series. And I'm not questioning people who have that taste, because those are objectively, I think, three very accomplished and very good manga. But when I see people so young claiming that as their taste, there's a part of me now that is like, do you really get it? Like, is it resonating with you in the way that it ought to be resonating with you as the author intends? Because there is so much this time around in rereading it. I mean, it was 14 volumes, like you say. It was a bit to read. Thankfully, it is quite a breezy story to get through, and it's not, like you say, the art carries it. The lack of dialogue doesn't detract from the story at all. You're so put into the vibe of this time and this place and what these characters have to live through in their daily life. But I don't think I got it when I was young. I think I definitely got it more now, and I definitely like it a lot more now. So yeah, that's one of my main takeaways from it. I think in terms of my take on it now, I like things that channel that mono no aware feeling, that like so particular Japanese essence of appreciating something while it lasts, and the fact that it doesn't last forever being the reason why it resonates with you so much. And I think YKK is one of those series that just delivers that excellently. I like, as you say, it's a dystopia as well, but it is kind of like a happy dystopia. characters making the most of the situation that they're in that we don't know the full details of. But in that sense, it does make me think of more recent slice of life anime and manga and how they tackle that similar sort of like happy-go-lucky, everything is great slice of life. I think this one, adding in that dystopian element, that adds another dimension to it. I do really enjoy the sci-fi elements in the background. They are kind of just in the background, and you check in with characters. For example, you see the ship that's flying over now and again. You see characters in other cities and things that they're doing, and I'm not gonna lie, there was a sense where whenever we got there, I was like, oh, something big's gonna happen. I want something a little bit more meaty and substantive when it comes to those moments. When we're with Alpha, I don't. When I'm with Alpha, I know what I'm expecting, and I enjoy the ease of her life and what she's going through. But if I was going to critique it, it was maybe that's just down to expectations. Whenever it went to those other characters, it kind of just hinted at what was happening, hinted at what did happen, or what these characters are thinking. It didn't really go as full in detail as it did with Alpha in particular. But yeah, I think that's my main takeaways from rereading it 10 plus years onwards.
I think I have a saying that I would apply to this. I've got a saying for everything, which people who tell me to shut up constantly would tell you. But my saying for this is life is what happens on the way. And I think that's very much the theme of YKK is life is what happens on the way. It's sort of a twist on the journey, not the destination. But I think it really, those big moments, you kind of expect them to come. But I think that's more, as you said, it's more expectation and it's of what a conventional series would do in that situation. And this one is not a conventional series. It's resolutely unconventional. And there is, for long stretches, a minimal amount of dialogue. He's very much a visual storyteller. He tells stories more with imagery than with words. So in that sense, it's the art more than the dialogue that carries things. But then again, you do have moments when the characters do say very profound things to each other. I can see if you go in with that expectation, it could let you down in that sense, because it's not a series that delivers the War of the Worlds moment. It doesn't do that. That's not what it's here for. By the same token, though, I think that it's one of the most imitated and one of the most, frankly, copied series probably in manga history. And I think more so in anime. I think you see anime, whole subgenres of anime over the last decade, quite recently, that are very clearly inspired by YKK, that into varying degrees of success, trying to recapture that same vibe, that same feeling that YKK captures. How successfully they do it is up to individual interpretation, I suppose. But I think imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Yeah, I'm thinking of those series that you say this could have been the inspiration for. What comes to mind for me is like recent example would be maybe like Girls' Last Tour, or going back a bit further as well, like Aria. That seems like a series that, comparing them both, there's a lot of similarities, and seeing how these girls navigate a dystopian future. Well, in Ari's case, it's not really dystopian, that's more of a utopia. But it's a similar situation of like plopping them in this strange environment that's different from our own and watching them navigate day-to-day life. I will say I do enjoy YKK more than both of those now that I've read it. So yeah, it is going to be interesting to compare any imitations, perhaps, of what try to capture that same vibe, that same approach to the story.
Yeah,
I
and it
will
doesn't it doesn't
say,
even have it doesn't even have to be imitation. I mean, it can be just inspiration too. Um, I want to talk a little bit too, if I can, about like my favorite element. One of my favorite elements of the story is again the visual storytelling. There's one particular character called Misago, who is one of those characters who is not what we would recognize. And like Alpha, like I said, if you look at Alpha, you would never necessarily know she wasn't a human being most of the time. Misago, we don't know quite what Misago is, and that's the mystery, is that he never quite spells it out. But there's one particular scene where Takahiro, the young character, meets her for the first time, and it's told with almost no dialogue. But it's just such an incredibly transportive passage, just through the imagery of it and the strangeness of it, and trying to establish what you should be feeling as you're seeing this. Should you be scared? Should you be entranced? Should you be horrified? Should you be excited? Should you be enthralled? It's kind of almost like a Rorschach test, in that sense. And there are many moments like that in the series. But are there any particular things that stand out for you, Samu, when you look back on your take on the story?
I said I really enjoyed Alpha's chapters. I do enjoy another one of my favorite chapters are when it jumps back as well with Oji-san and Sensei. This you see their life as they had it before, however many years before, and how things are like different but not too different. Those moments, I think, those chapters are some of my favorites. If I was to be critical, I wasn't too keen on the stuff with I forget his name now, the traveling man. Ayase.
Oh, Ayase.
The
Yeah, I remember him.
Ayase chapters, it's one of those series where it jumps between these like other characters in the cast. I think like Ayase, the stuff with Kokone. Whenever I was getting to them, I was kind of like, okay, let's go back to Alpha. Let's go back to like Alpha on the ship. I think I definitely did just end up having preferences on certain characters and storylines, which I think is fine. It's just there is some chapters that I breeze through easier than others. What I did want to ask is, when I think of those comparisons to things like Aria, Girls Last Tour, or just anything that qualifies as cute girls doing cute things, or like those quote unquote healing series that you've
Mhm.
mentioned are not your favorites, and I know that from you that you can. I feel like for every 100 that come out, maybe like one of them you can tolerate. I don't know if that number is accurate. You can confirm or deny, but I'm curious because reading this, I'm curious how different you think this is from those sorts of series. So I
Well,
feel like it came first, but I think there are elements, especially as well let's say like the hints of soft lesbianism, which I think is prevalent in also these sorts of series. Where is it going to tackle any like queer themes on a serious level? Is it like pandering to like a male audience? I'm not saying that the series necessarily does that, but having the androids these girls kissing each other to relay those messages, I don't think there's
hmm.
anything necessarily insidious behind it. But it was something that came to my mind. I was like, it is kind of ticking off similar features of those series that you don't like. So thinking this is your all-time favorite, yeah, I was curious about that.
Well, I think there's a couple factors that go into this. And first of all, another series I feel was strongly influenced by this is Kino's Journey. Kino no Tabi, I think, is a very, 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 very influenced by YKK. Um, uh, why this is different for me, first of all, authenticity is a part of it. And I think because this really was the trailblazer This was really it's like if something gets it, you sometimes in science fiction it's like things get cloned, but every time there's a clone it comes out slightly imperfect and wrong, and you get farther and farther away, and the more generations out the more imperfections, and and eventually just comes out, it comes out of the pod looking like some kind of a circus freak. And I feel like there's kind of an element of that with YKK, where it's the perfect original, and there are so many generations, series that cloned it, and then series that cloned the clones, and now we're in series that clone the clones, and they're getting more and more missing because they miss the point. They're about the affectations and not the essence, and I feel like that's really the main difference. And the other reason I feel like this series stands head and shoulders above those is one simple word: is restraint. It never oversells the moment, which so many of these series that you describe, I think they do. It's very restrained. It doesn't oversell. I don't think it is a cute girls doing cute things series in the first place, even though Alpha certainly is cute. But to the extent that it does have them doing cute things, hell, even Oji-san is cute in his way, but it doesn't oversell the moment. It's restraint, and restraint, it's like a dessert that is too sweet versus one that has a little bit of citrus in it, and maybe even it's like a little chili on the chocolate to cut through the sweetness. And it's like a confection that's in perfect balance versus one that's out of a box of Hostess cupcakes, or Jaffa cakes. Maybe it would be more appropriate to the other side of the pond. But it's very commercial and very sweet and very one note versus something that's subtlety and depth and balance. And to me, YKK has what it has that those series don't have, is subtlety and depth and complexity and balance. And a few of them have it, but none of them have it at the same level it does. And the lesser examples have almost none of it. They're just poor facsimiles. That's my opinion. Your mileage may vary and everyone's mileage may vary, but that's my take on it. That's what I would say. All right, we can get into. Go ahead, Dozo. Please go.
And I do want to say as well, I do have a couple of critiques for it, and there were just some parts that didn't resonate with me as much, like on an emotional level. But two things that I really enjoy. It's not even really a spoiler because this isn't really a series you can spoil much of, but I love the passage of time and let's just say the aging of characters, and how it flows so effortlessly, and before you know it, time has moved by, and you compare what Alpha is experiencing with the rest of these human characters. I think that feeling is really powerful, which I think goes back to the Mono no Owari theme that I enjoy. And also, like, I noticed as well, sometimes as I was reading it, I read a chapter, or if I read it in bulk, I read a volume or two, I would go through and be like, oh, that was nice. And then I would put it down and I would do something else. And then like 10 minutes later, I would think about it and I'd be like, this is definitely the sort of series where I'm enjoying it more as I reflect on the distance I have from it. So whatever score I do give it in the end, I think if it does change at all, it would only go up, because it does feel like that sort of series to me.
Yeah, I agree with you. It is definitely a great on reflection sort of series. It is one that the more you think back on it, the more impact it has. All right, now I want to get into the recommendation section here before we get into the ratings. And so, thinking hard about this series, you think, oh well, Enzo, if you say it's the most copied series of all time, which I think it may very well be, it should be easy to come up with a recommendation, right? And I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, sure, but this isn't really about a series that's copying it. The hard part for me was coming out with one which understood the essence of it but didn't copy it. And what I settled on was Tengoku Daimakyo, Heavenly Delusion by Masakazu Ishiguro, which just had a absolutely stunning and stellar anime adaptation just this last year. And the reason I picked that, there is a mysterious dystopia in this one too, although with Heavenly Delusion, the dystopia is much more of an active story element. But I love the way Masakazu, in the same way Ashinano does, shows you the real world as we know it, but through the lens of something strange having happened to it. So there's that same sense of looking at something through a funhouse mirror, if you will. It's a very different series in tone, but especially as we go through with the two main characters in Heavenly Delusion, who really are just a really, really a deeply lovable and empathetic pair of teenagers with a very strange story, but so recognizably just normal kids too. The focus on the importance of, hey, what are we going to eat? What are we going to have to eat tonight? Where can we find some food? Where do we want to sleep? All these things, just the functions of daily existence, the joys of daily existence of being with another person that you like being with. The focus on that, I think, is really important in that. And again, just blurring the line between the present and the future, although it does it in a different way. I think it does take inspiration. So why I like Tengaku Daimakyo as a recommendation here is because it's not a series that imitates Yokohama Kaidashi Kikou. It's a series that's inspired by it. And I think that's a much more precious commodity for me. I only wish YKK had gotten the anime adaptation that Tengoku Daimakyo did, because I think it could have been absolutely spectacular. It's certainly a better manga. Heavenly Delusion is an excellent manga. It's still ongoing. I really enjoy it, but it got an absolutely just a beautiful, beautiful, fantastic, stunning anime adaptation that enhanced the experience. And that's the biggest difference between it and YKK, which did not get a decent anime adaptation or anything remotely complete or especially effective. So that's my pick, Heavenly Delusion, and Masakazu Ishiguro. So now over to you, Samu. What is your choice for a recommendation?
My choice, it's hard with this one because, this is your favorite manga of all time. If I pick any series, I feel like, how can it live up to your expectations of that in particular? I'm going to go with one which does actually have an anime coming up. It's just been announced recently. This is Kowloon Generic Romance by Jun Mayuzuki. She's most famous for After the Rain, which I haven't watched the anime of it, but I've heard that was also a fantastic adaptation. I don't want to give away too much, but I would say they're both very confidently written seinen manga that tackle similar themes but handle the story and the narrative quite differently. It's quite yin and yang. At the heart of it, you've got these two adult women who are, let's just say, different from everyone around them, and it's showing their adjustments of how they operate and how they're functioning with different people. And as well as that, Kowloon has similar play of past, present, and future that YKK does. YKK is more reflective, I would say. It doesn't focus too much on it from a narrative point of view, whereas Kowloon Generic Romance, definitely that's more inherently part of the confusion, the perspective, the mix of what's past, what's future, what's present. It's meant to be intentionally muddy and confusing, and it's part of the mystery that makes it so enticing. And it also has somewhat of a similar post-dystopian living in the moment, understanding the world we're in approach as well, that is quite similar to YKK. So I'm trying to because Kowloon Generic Romance is a mystery and almost like a thriller, I'm trying not to reveal any plot elements, but
Yeah, I'm getting that.
That is one that on a lot of levels I think channels similarities, and I think you already have high expectations for what's going to come out with the anime, even though I don't believe you're familiar with the manga. But I don't want to raise your expectations so high that you'll be disappointed. But I think it is a thoroughly excellent manga.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm the opposite with After the Rain. I've seen the anime and not read. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I have read the manga now that I think about it, and I love them both. But you're right. That did receive. I was going to say I talked about Heavenly Delusion having one of the greatest adaptations ever. After the Rain got a beautiful, beautiful adaptation by Watanabe Ayumu was the director, who's one of the best in the business, and both by the Production IG family too. Heavenly Delusion is IG, and After the Rain is WIT, the subsidiary of IG. So I'm definitely looking forward to the Kowloon anime. I think this is a terrific mangaka, and I've heard only good things about this series. I'm definitely looking forward to it. And with that, we're going to tie a bow on this. So let's go into the scores. I'm going to tell you my score on this. As I said on our previous recording with Samu's favorite, I've never given 100. This is the closest. There's another series, Spirit Circle, I would maybe rank in the same number. I think it's less ambitious in some ways than YKK, but more perfect, if that makes any sense. So a 97 is what I give YKK. And Samu, what's your score on this one?
So my score is going to be an 80 in the end. And like I said, this is one that I think could increase as it goes. The only reason why it's not any higher is kind of what I said. There were certain characters and chapters of storylines that resonated less with me. So splitting that perspective across all those characters just maybe lowered my enjoyment overall. But yeah, comparing it to what I gave it before, because I do have a database of everything. I like to keep my ratings of everything I've read. I did actually give this 63 before when I read it, so I've given it a sizable jump, and yeah, it's a lot better than I originally gave it credit for.
Well, let me just remark that the difference between your 63 and 80, if that happened again the next time you read it, you would hit 97 at 17 points. So there you go. You're headed in the right direction.
Well, there you go.
Okay, I want to thank everyone, as always, for tuning in, and thank you, Samu, for your thoughtful and insightful contributions. And I also, quick last note on this, if you do read YKK or read it and loved it, I did forget to mention another recommendation. There's a series called Isaku's Cub by the same author, Isaku, Isaku, Isaku's Cub, which is not a sequel to YKK, but is broadly speaking set in the same mythology, it's believed. So if you love this series, you should definitely read that one as well. It's also excellent. So I thank you everyone for tuning in, and thank you 7Cs for licensing YKK last and making it available legally to everyone in English, and we'll see you next time. Thanks a lot.